Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd love to know what you think. Every comment helps me make the next story better. Subscribe to stay tuned. I came home that Thursday evening expecting nothing unusual. Maybe we'd order takeout, watch something mindless on TV, fall asleep on the couch like we did most nights. But the moment I walked through the door, I knew something had changed. Melissa was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open and a notebook filled with what looked like bullet points. She had this energy about her, confident and clinical, like she'd just solved a complicated equation. "We need to talk," she said. I set my keys down. "Okay." She took a breath, the kind people take before delivering rehearsed news. "I had a breakthrough in my session with Brenda today." "Brenda?" "My life coach. I've been seeing her for 6 weeks now." 6 weeks. I didn't even know it was ongoing. I thought the life coach thing was a one-time consultation she'd mentioned in passing. "She helped me realize something important," Melissa continued. "I've been too available in this marriage. I give, and I never ask for anything in return." I pulled out a chair and sat down. "What do you need?" "That's just it. I shouldn't have to ask. It should be natural." She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite place. "I need to create boundaries. I need you to earn my affection. Brenda says healthy boundaries mean I shouldn't just give everything away for free." The words hung in the air between us. "Earn it. Like affection was something you purchased with good behavior." "Earn it," I repeated. "We're married. Marriage doesn't mean I owe you emotional labor without reciprocation." I tried to understand. "What do you need me to do?" "That's not the point," she said, and I heard frustration creeping into her voice. "You should want to. It should come naturally if you really value me." I sat there trying to process the circular logic. She wanted me to do something, but she wouldn't tell me what. I was supposed to figure it out, to prove myself worthy of what I thought I already had. Something twisted inside me. Not anger exactly. Recognition. This wasn't about fixing a problem. This was about control dressed up in therapy language. "I see," I said quietly. She watched me, waiting for more. When I didn't give it, she stood up. "I'm emotionally exhausted from setting these boundaries. I'm going to bed early." I stayed at the table after she left, staring at the notebook she'd forgotten to close. I could see phrases written in her handwriting. Reclaim power. Emotional availability schedule. Strategic withdrawal. I sat there for a long time that night, thinking. I could already see where this was headed. She'd set up a game where I was supposed to chase her approval, scramble to meet expectations she'd never clearly defined. And every time I tried, the finish line would move. I decided then that I wasn't going to play. The first few days were subtle. She made small tests, like dropping hints to see if I'd pick them up. On Saturday morning, she made herself coffee, but didn't make mine. It was a small thing. We'd been together 6 years, married for 4. She knew how I took my coffee. She'd made it automatically every morning for as long as I could remember. I noticed, but I didn't say anything. I just made my own cup. She lingered near the counter, watching. "I'm practicing self-care," she finally said. "Making my needs a priority." "Good for you," I said, and I meant it to sound neutral. She wanted me to ask why she'd stopped. She wanted me to notice the absence and feel it like a punishment. I could see it in the way she waited. That evening, she brought up her life coach again. I told Brenda about our conversation. "She says this is really healthy. I'm reclaiming my power." I nodded. "Brenda has other clients who've done this too. They've had transformative results." "What kind of results?" I asked. "Partners who start showing up differently, being more present, more intentional." I nodded again, but didn't ask what she meant by showing up differently. She was waiting for me to ask how I could show up better, how I could be more intentional. I wouldn't give her that. On Tuesday evening, she announced her new system. "I'm implementing emotional availability windows," she said, showing me a schedule she'd written out. "I'll be open to connection during these times. Outside of them, I need autonomous space." The schedule divided our evenings into blocks. 7 to 8 was her autonomous time. 8 to 9 was potential connection time. After 9 was personal wind down. I looked at the paper. Okay. Just that. Okay. No argument about how absurd it was to schedule intimacy like a business meeting. No questions about what autonomous space meant in a shared apartment. She seemed slightly deflated by my acceptance, like she'd expected pushback. By the end of the first week, I'd started to understand what was happening. This wasn't about her needs or her boundaries. This was an experiment, and I was the test subject. She wanted to see me scramble, to watch me try to figure out the rules of a game that had no winning moves. On Sunday night, she did her weekly check-in. We were in the bedroom, getting ready for sleep, when she asked, "How are you feeling about the changes?" "Which changes?" "The boundaries. The new structure." "They're your boundaries," I said. "I'm not feeling anything particular about them." She paused. I could see her trying to process my non-reaction. "Brenda says the first week is when partners usually resist the most." "I'm not resisting." "No," she said quietly. "You're not." And that, I realized, was the problem. She wanted resistance so she could overcome it. She wanted me to fight against her boundaries so she could feel powerful in maintaining them. I wasn't giving her that. Week 2 started with a new tactic. Monday morning, over breakfast, she mentioned another couple. Ashley and Trevor did this boundary exercise with Brenda too. Trevor had been emotionally unavailable, so Ashley made him earn back her trust. I took a bite of toast. He wrote her letters every day for a month, she continued. Planned surprise dates. Really showed effort. She paused, waiting. I knew what she wanted. She wanted me to feel inadequate, to compare myself to Trevor and come up short, to ask what I could do to measure up. That's nice for them, I said. Her jaw tightened just slightly, but she didn't push it. That Saturday, she announced she was going out with friends that evening. Nothing unusual about that, except for how deliberately she prepared. She tried on 3 different outfits, each time walking past where I sat reading on the couch. "Does this look okay?" she asked, wearing a dress I hadn't seen before. "Looks fine. Just fine. You look nice." She waited for more. I didn't give it. Before she left, she lingered at the door. "I might be out late. Brenda says I should embrace social freedom." "Have fun," I said, not looking up from my book. I knew what this was. A jealousy test. She wanted me to ask where she was going, who she'd be with, why she'd be out so late. She wanted to see me worried about losing her. I went back to my reading. She came home at 1:15 in the morning. I was still awake, sitting on the couch with my book. I'd been too restless to sleep, but it wasn't because of where she'd been. "You waited up?" she asked. "Couldn't sleep. Reading." "You're not going to ask where I was?" "Should I?" She set her purse down harder than necessary. "Most husbands would want to know. Did you have a good time?" "That's not the point." "Then I'm not sure what is." She stared at me for a long moment, then went to the bedroom without another word. The cracks were showing. This wasn't going according to whatever plan she and Brenda had mapped out. On Monday evening, she came home from her weekly life coach session looking agitated. She found me in the kitchen making dinner. "Brenda asked how you've been responding to the boundaries," she said. I looked up from the cutting board. "What did you tell her?" "That you're accepting them. Isn't that the goal? But you're not showing any effort to earn your way back." "Back to what?" "To connection." Her voice rose. "To intimacy. To us." I set down the knife. "I thought you set boundaries because those things weren't working for you." "They weren't. But you're supposed to show me you care enough to fight for them." "Why would I fight against your boundaries?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. She had no good answer because the logic didn't hold. She'd set up a contradiction, and I'd walked right to the center of it. The next day, while Melissa was at another life coach session, I found myself looking at that notebook she'd left on the table. I didn't plan to snoop. It was just sitting there, open to a page with a heading that caught my eye: Relationship Recalibration Protocol. Below it were steps. Actual numbered steps, like a recipe. 1. Establish scarcity of affection. 2. Create comparison anxiety. 3. Implement unpredictability. 4. Observe partners' pursuit behaviors. 5. Reward intermittently to maintain engagement. I stood there reading it 3 times. This wasn't therapy. This wasn't healthy boundary setting. This was a manual for manipulation. There were notes in the margins too, in Melissa's handwriting. Week 1, withdrawal. Week 2, jealousy triggers. Week 3, evaluate response level. I closed the notebook carefully and put it back exactly where I'd found it. I didn't feel angry. I felt something closer to relief. Because now I knew for certain. This wasn't about fixing our marriage. This was about running an experiment on me. Later that week, I rejoined the gym. I'd let my membership lapse about a year ago, too busy with work and too tired in the evenings. But suddenly I had time. I'd been going after work, staying for an hour or so before coming home. "Since when?" Melissa asked when I mentioned it. "Few days ago. Felt like getting back into shape." "You're just doing that now?" "When I set boundaries." They're not related. But they were, and she knew it. I was reclaiming my own time, my own space. I was remembering what I used to do before everything became about managing her moods and meeting her unspoken expectations. "It feels like you're pulling away," she said. "I thought space was what you wanted." She didn't have an answer for that either. Week 2 was when everything inverted. She'd set up a game where I was supposed to chase her approval. Instead, I'd found something better. I'd found my own. By the 3rd week, she was panicking. Monday morning, she hugged me from behind while I made breakfast. "I miss you. I'm right here. You know what I mean." I didn't know what she meant. She missed the version of me that tried constantly, that worked to earn her satisfaction, that treated her moods like puzzles I needed to solve. But that person was exhausting, and I'd let him go. She was being affectionate now, suddenly and intensely. Her carefully constructed boundaries had vanished. She touched my arm when we talked, smiled more, laughed at things that weren't particularly funny. It wasn't real connection. It was panic disguised as affection. The next evening, she tore up her emotional availability schedule right in front of me. "I don't think we need this anymore." "Okay. Don't you want to know why? If you want to tell me." "Because I think we can be more spontaneous." I nodded. She was watching me desperately, waiting for enthusiasm. I stayed calm, neutral. She was trying to reset, to go back to how things were. But you can't unring a bell. On Wednesday night, she sat on the edge of our bed where I was reading. "Do you even love me anymore?" I put the book down and looked at her honestly. "I'm not sure love is the question." "What does that mean?" "It means I think we've been asking the wrong questions for a while now." Her eyes welled up. "Brenda said you might emotionally withdraw. She said some partners do that." "Is that what you think this is?" "Isn't it? Maybe you should ask yourself why my not chasing feels like withdrawal." She went quiet. That night, I called Greg. We'd been friends since college, and he lived in a converted loft in Pioneer Square. "Hey man, can we grab dinner tomorrow?" I asked. "Yeah, of course. Everything okay?" "I'll explain tomorrow." We met at a burger place near his apartment. Greg took one look at me and said, "You're leaving her." It wasn't a question. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." "What happened?" I told him about the life coach, the boundaries, the earning period, the notebook with its protocol steps, the tests, all of it. Greg listened without interrupting. When I finished, he sat back in his chair. "That's insane. The crazy part is she thinks she's doing healthy relationship work. Do you have a place to stay? I was hoping I could crash with you for a bit, just until I find an apartment." "Stay as long as you need," Greg said immediately. "The couch folds out. It's not fancy, but it's yours." Having that option, knowing I had somewhere to go, made the decision real in a way it hadn't been before. The next evening, she asked me to come to a life coach session with her. "Brenda thinks it would be good for us both to come in." What would we talk about? The disconnect. The distance. "I don't think a life coach session will help." "Why not?" "Because the problem isn't communication." "Then what is it?" "The problem is you set up a dynamic where I had to prove myself constantly. And I'm done proving myself." It was the first time I'd said it out loud that clearly. She stared at me, unable to respond. On Friday, she mentioned she'd talked to our friend Rachel. She said, "You seem happier lately." "I've been feeling better, even with everything going on. Maybe because of it." She looked stricken. I could see her realizing it in real time. She was losing me. Not because I'd stopped caring. Because I'd started caring about myself. By Thursday of the 3rd week, we couldn't avoid it anymore. She sat me down in the living room that evening. "We need to really talk," she said. "Okay. I don't think the boundary work is helping us. I don't think it was ever about us." "What do you mean?" Earlier that day, I'd watched her prepare for her life coach session. She'd laid out her notebook, reviewed her notes, practiced what she was going to say. She talked to herself in the mirror, rehearsing phrases. "I'm maintaining my boundaries. I'm prioritizing my needs. I'm creating healthy space." It was like watching someone prep for a performance review. She wasn't going to therapy to process feelings or gain insight. She was going to report metrics and receive validation. When she'd left for the session, I realized something. She wasn't just manipulating me. She was being manipulated too. Brenda had sold her a framework that made her feel powerful while actually making her more dependent. Every week, Melissa paid money to be told she was doing the right thing, even as her marriage crumbled. It was sad, really, but it wasn't my responsibility to save her from it. Now, sitting across from her in our living room, I took a breath. "You wanted me to compete for you, to feel like I had to constantly earn your affection. But Melissa, we're married. We're supposed to be partners." I was working on myself. You were working on me. I kept my voice level. When you told me I needed to earn your affection, something shifted. Not because I didn't want to make you happy, but because I realized I'd been doing that for years already. She started to interrupt, but I continued. Every time I adjusted my schedule, every time I checked in, every time I made sure you felt valued, that was already me showing up. But it was never enough. And it never would be enough. Because the goal wasn't for me to earn anything. The goal was to keep me trying. That's not fair, she said, her voice breaking. I was just trying to set boundaries. You were setting traps. I said it gently but firmly. Your life coach gave you language to justify something that was already happening. You needed me to feel less secure so you could feel more powerful. Brenda said you might make me the villain. I'm not making you the villain. I'm just done being the contestant. She started crying. So that's it. You're giving up on us? You gave up on us the moment you turned our marriage into a test. The silence stretched between us. Finally, I said what I'd been thinking for days. I'm going to stay with Greg for a while. Greg was a friend from college who lived in Pioneer Square. I'd already called him earlier that week. How long? She asked. I don't know. Maybe permanently. This is because I try to set boundaries? This is because you set traps. I packed a bag the next morning. She watched from the bedroom doorway, silent. At the door, I paused. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said. What if what I was looking for was you? Then you wouldn't have made me earn it. I found out later, through Rachel, what happened at Melissa's life coach session that Friday. It was her regular appointment, same time as always. But instead of talking about strategy or boundary maintenance, she spent the entire hour sobbing. This wasn't supposed to end like this, she kept saying. He was supposed to fight for me. Brenda apparently had no good answers. The strategy had backfired completely. The boundary work, the emotional availability windows, the earning period, all of it had been designed to make me more attentive, more devoted, more desperate for her approval. Instead, it had freed me. The first few days at Greg's place felt strange. Not painful, not heartbreaking, just quiet. I thought I'd feel lost, like I'd abandoned something I was supposed to keep fighting for. But instead I felt lighter. My first morning there, I woke up at 6. Greg was still asleep. I laced up my old running shoes, the ones I'd found at the bottom of my closet when packing, and headed out. The air was cold and damp, typical Seattle morning weather. I ran through Pioneer Square, past the old buildings and the empty streets. My legs remembered the rhythm even though it had been years. Left foot, right foot, breathe in, breathe out. I ran up to Capitol Hill, past the apartment I'd shared with Melissa. I didn't stop or slow down. It was just a building now. Not a home, not a prison, just a place I used to live. I kept going, down toward Lake Union. The water was calm, reflecting the gray sky. A few other runners passed me, nodding in that way runners do, acknowledging each other's effort without words. By the time I reached Gasworks Park, my shirt was soaked with sweat and I was breathing hard. I stopped on the hill, hands on my knees, looking out at the city waking up. The Space Needle in the distance. The boats in the marina. The world continuing on like it always did. I sat down on the grass, still catching my breath. And I realized I was smiling. Actually smiling. Not because I was happy about the divorce, or because I'd won some imaginary contest, but because I was doing something I wanted to do, without having to explain it or justify it or worry about how it would be received. I was just running. Just being. And it felt like freedom. I started running again. It was something I'd done all through college in my 20s, but somewhere along the way I'd stopped. Now I had time. I'd run through Capitol Hill in the early mornings, down to Lake Union, sometimes all the way to Gasworks Park. I'd sit on the hill there, looking out at the city, and just breathe. Greg noticed the change. You seem different, he said one evening. Better. I feel like myself again. Melissa texted me throughout those first 2 weeks. Can we talk? I told Brenda I was wrong. I miss my husband. Please call me. I read each message. I didn't reply. It wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. She was reaching out, but she was still using the same language. My husband. Like I was a possession she'd misplaced. Like if she just said the right words, I'd come back and we'd restart the game. But I wasn't a game piece anymore. One evening, I sat at Gasworks Park as the sun set over the water. I thought about the past 3 weeks and what they'd taught me. I didn't miss the relationship. I missed who I thought we were. But that person, that relationship, it was never real. It was always conditional, always transactional. I'd spent years trying to earn something that should have been given freely. And the moment I stopped trying, I discovered I didn't actually want it anymore. I picked up my phone that night. Melissa's contact was on the screen. Part of me wanted to call, to explain more, to make sure she understood. But I knew she never would, because understanding would require her to see what she'd done. And she was too invested in the narrative that she'd been working on healthy boundaries. I put the phone down and opened my laptop. I started looking at apartment listings. 1-bedrooms in Fremont, studios in Ballard. Places that were mine, not ours. Moving forward felt right in a way nothing had felt right in a long time. I imagined Melissa's life coach sessions would continue. She'd find new strategies, new language for old patterns. Maybe the next partner would play along longer than I did. Maybe someone else would find the game rewarding. But I was done being a strategy, done being a boundary exercise, done being someone's self-improvement project. A few weeks later, I signed a lease on a small apartment in Ballard. It had big windows and faced west, so I got the sunset every evening. I bought new furniture, cheap stuff from IKEA that I assembled myself. It felt good to build something, even if it was just a bookshelf. I started going to a different coffee shop in the mornings, one near my new place. The barista learned my order after the third visit. It was a small thing, but it mattered. Someone saw me, remembered me, not because they had to, but because that's what happens when you show up consistently and don't make every interaction a test. Rachel called me once to check in. Melissa asked me to talk to you, she admitted. I told her I wouldn't, but I wanted to make sure you're okay. I'm good, I said. Really good. She seems lost, Rachel said. She keeps saying she doesn't understand what happened. That's the thing, I said. She understood exactly what she was doing. She just didn't expect it to work in reverse. One Saturday morning, I ran into one of Melissa's friends at the grocery store. She gave me a look that was somewhere between pity and judgment. I heard you left, she said. I did. She's really struggling. I'm sorry to hear that. Just like that? After 4 years of marriage? I wanted to explain, to list everything that had happened, every test and trap and manipulation dressed up as self-improvement. But I didn't know this person my story. Yeah, I said, just like that. A week later, I was at a coffee shop near my apartment when a younger guy from work spotted me. His name was Ryan, and he was maybe 25. We'd talked a few times at company events, but never really connected. Hey Connor, he said, sitting down across from me. Mind if I join you? Go ahead. He had this look on his face like he was working up to something. Finally, he said, I heard you and your wife split up. We did. Can I ask you something? It's personal, so feel free to tell me to mind my own business. What is it? My girlfriend started seeing a life coach a few months ago, and ever since, things have been weird. She's always testing me, setting up these situations where I have to prove myself. I feel like I'm constantly failing tests I don't know I'm taking. I set down my coffee. What kind of tests? Like, she'll go out and not tell me where. Then get mad if I don't ask enough questions, but also mad if I ask too many. Or she'll say she needs space, then accuse me of not caring when I give it to her. Everything feels like a trap. I recognized every word he was saying. I'd lived it. Does her life coach talk about boundaries? I asked. All the time. That's the word she uses for everything now. But they don't feel like real boundaries. They feel like mind games. That's because they are, I said. Real boundaries are clear. They're about protecting yourself, not testing other people. What she's doing isn't boundary setting. It's manipulation with a self-help vocabulary. Ryan looked relieved, like someone had finally validated what he'd been feeling. So what did you do? I stopped playing. I stopped trying to pass her tests. And when I did, the whole thing fell apart. Did you try to fix it? You can't fix something that was designed to be broken, I said. If your girlfriend is getting this from her life coach, she's paying someone to teach her how to control you. And she won't stop unless she realizes that's what she's doing. Most people never realize it. Ryan nodded slowly. I think I need to have a conversation with her. Maybe. Or maybe you just need to leave. That's what I learned. Some battles aren't worth fighting. He thanked me and left. I hoped he'd take the advice. I hoped he wouldn't spend years like I had, trying to solve an equation with no solution. I learned something important in those weeks after leaving. I learned the difference between someone who wants you to earn their love and someone who gives it freely. The first will never be satisfied. The second will never make you ask. Melissa wanted a partner who would fight for her. But I'd been fighting all along. Fighting to be enough. Fighting to meet moving goalposts. fighting against the sinking feeling that I was failing at something I didn't understand. When I stopped fighting, I didn't lose. I was finally free. I thought about calling her sometimes, usually late at night when the apartment was quiet and I was alone with my thoughts. I'd wonder if she'd figured it out yet. If Brenda had ever admitted that her strategy was flawed. If Melissa had found another way to frame the story where she wasn't responsible. But then I'd remember sitting at that kitchen table, looking at her notebook full of tactics and strategies. I'd remember the emotional availability schedule, the earning period, the tests, and I'd put my phone away. By the time a month had passed, I barely thought about her at all. I was busy with my own life. I'd reconnected with old friends, people I'd slowly dropped as Melissa demanded more of my time and energy. I joined a running group that met twice a week. I was reading again, really reading, not just staring at pages while worrying about what mood I'd come home to. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself searching online for information about manipulative life coaching practices. I wasn't looking for validation or revenge. I just wanted to understand what had happened. I found a forum dedicated to people who'd experienced similar things. Hundreds of posts from people whose partners had hired life coaches and then weaponized the language of self-improvement. The stories were eerily similar, creating boundaries that were actually ultimatums, earning affection as if love were a commodity, strategic withdrawal disguised as self-care. One post stood out. A woman wrote, "My husband's life coach told him he needed to make me compete for his attention. She said it would increase my investment in the relationship. Instead, it killed any love I had left. I divorced him 6 months later. He still doesn't understand why." Another person wrote, "These coaches sell a fantasy of control. They tell you that if you just follow the right steps, you can get anyone to do anything. But relationships aren't algorithms. They're built on trust and respect. The minute you turn them into games, you've already lost." I closed the laptop feeling sad. Not for myself. For Melissa. She'd paid someone to destroy her marriage, and she probably still thought she was the victim in all of this. I was myself again, not the version that had been slowly eroded by constant testing. The actual version. The one who existed before I'd learned to second-guess everything I did. One evening, I was at a bar in Fremont with some friends when my phone buzzed. It was a long text from Melissa. I didn't read past the first line. "I've been thinking about what went wrong." I deleted it. Not out of anger. Out of disinterest. She was still trying to solve the puzzle, still trying to understand why her strategy had backfired. But there was no puzzle. There was just the simple truth that you can't build a relationship on tests and expect it to feel like love. The life coach sessions would continue, I imagined. Melissa would find new approaches, new frameworks. Maybe one day she'd realize that real boundaries aren't about withholding affection until someone proves themselves worthy. Real boundaries are about knowing yourself well enough to communicate clearly and honestly. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I had my own life now. My own apartment, my own routines, my own peace. And every morning when I woke up, I didn't have to wonder what I'd done wrong or how I could do better. I just had to be myself. That, I realized, was all I'd ever wanted. Not her approval, just peace. The strategy had failed. The boundaries had backfired. The earning period had ended with me walking away instead of working harder. And I'd never been happier. Sometimes the greatest act of self-respect is recognizing when someone views you as a project instead of a partner. When they see your love as something to be rationed rather than shared. When they turn a relationship into a game with rules only they understand. I'd spent 3 weeks learning that lesson. And however many years it took to really internalize it. But I'd learned. I was done being someone's strategy. Done being a boundary exercise. Done being anyone's self-improvement project. I was just done. And that was enough. Dear listeners, that's our ending. If it resonated, subscribe to support the channel. See you next time.